Sophia didn't know that the man standing at the edge of the village square, watching her through the downpour, was the most powerful ruler in the 5 kingdoms. She didn't know that he'd been searching for her for 3 years. All she knew was the rain. Cold. Relentless. Soaking through her threadbare cloak until she couldn't feel where the fabric ended and her skin began. The storm had rolled in without warning, sending the market vendors scrambling to cover their wares, sending the villagers running for shelter beneath awnings and doorways. No one had made room for her. She'd tried. She'd approached the baker's stall, where 3 women huddled together beneath the canvas overhang. They'd looked at her with those eyes she knew so well. Disgusted. Afraid. The baker's wife had actually pulled her daughter closer, as if Sophia carried some contagion. "Find somewhere else. Cursed one," the woman had hissed. So Sophia had found somewhere else. The middle of the empty square, where the rain hammered against the cobblestones and thunder rolled across the darkening sky. She'd stopped running, stopped trying. She'd simply stood there, face tilted toward the clouds, letting the water wash over her like a baptism she'd never asked for. That was when the tears had started. She couldn't even say why. Maybe it was the cold seeping into her bones. Maybe it was the way the baker's daughter had looked at her with such fear. Maybe it was the weight of 23 years of being the village pariah, the orphan with the strange silver eyes who brought bad luck wherever she went. "Everyone hates me," she whispered to no one. Then louder, a broken sound that the thunder swallowed. "Everyone hates me." She didn't expect anyone to hear. She certainly didn't expect the rain to stop, not the storm. The storm continued to rage around her, lightning splitting the sky to the east. But directly above her head, the rain simply ceased to fall, as if an invisible barrier had formed between her and the heavens. Sophia blinked. Water dripped from her lashes, and she wiped it away to find a dark umbrella hovering over her. Large enough to shelter 2, made of some material that seemed to drink in the dim light rather than reflect it. She followed the umbrella to the hand that held it. A large hand, scarred across the knuckles, steady despite the wind that whipped at everything else in the square. Up the arm clad in black leather, across broad shoulders, to a face that made her breath catch in her throat. He was beautiful in the way that storms were beautiful. Dark hair plastered to his forehead by rain he seemed entirely unconcerned about. Sharp jaw, sharper cheekbones, and eyes. Gods above, his eyes. They were the deep amber of aged whiskey, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her take an instinctive step backward. She collided with his chest. He'd moved. Somehow, without her seeing, he'd moved behind her so that when she retreated, she found only the solid wall of him. His free hand came up to steady her, fingers curling around her upper arm. Even through her soaked cloak, she could feel the heat of him, like touching a banked fire. "Careful," he said. His voice was low, rough at the edges. It did something strange to her heartbeat. "The cobblestones are slick." Sophia twisted away from his grip, putting distance between them. She was shaking now, though she couldn't tell if it was from cold or fear or something else entirely. Something that hummed beneath her skin like lightning waiting to strike. "Who are you?" she demanded. His head tilted slightly, studying her. The umbrella remained perfectly positioned over her head, keeping her sheltered while the rain continued to drench his shoulders, his hair, the expensive-looking leather of his coat. "You're cold," he said, ignoring her question. "I'm fine." "You're lying." Before she could respond, he was shrugging off his coat. Heavy black wool lined with something soft and warm. He draped it over her shoulders without asking permission, his hands lingering for just a moment on the lapels as he drew it closed around her. "There," he murmured. "Better." It was better. The coat was so warm it almost burned, and it smelled like him. Pine and wood smoke and something darker. Something that made her want to lean closer, She resisted the urge with considerable effort. "You didn't answer my question." A smile ghosted across his lips. Brief, gone before she could fully register it. "No, I didn't." Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this. The man turned and began walking toward the edge of the square, toward a narrow alley between two buildings that Sofia knew led to the village's only inn. He paused when he realized she wasn't following, looking back over his shoulder with one eyebrow raised. "Coming? I don't know you." "No, but you're soaked through, you're freezing, and unless I'm mistaken, no one in this village is going to offer you shelter tonight." His amber eyes swept over the square, over the faces peering out from doorways and windows. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Am I wrong?" Sofia said nothing. She didn't need to. "I have a room at the inn," he continued. "A fire, dry clothes, food if you're hungry." He paused. "I'm not going to hurt you, Sofia." She went very still. "How do you know my name?" Another almost smile, another non-answer. "Are you coming or not?" Every instinct she had screamed at her to run. This man was dangerous. She could feel it in the way he moved, the way he held himself, the way the very air seemed to grow heavy in his presence. He was a predator, and she was very much prey. But her instincts had also told her to stay in this village, to endure the hatred and the whispers and the stones thrown at her back, because at least here she knew what to expect. At least here she had a routine. A crumbling cottage at the edge of the forest, a garden that produced just enough to keep her alive, a life that was gray and cold and utterly devoid of hope. Maybe a little danger was exactly what she needed. She followed him. The alley was narrow and dark, the buildings pressing close on either side. Rain still pounded the cobblestones, and Sofia had to watch her step to avoid the puddles that gathered in every dip and crack. Jasper walked ahead of her, his umbrella abandoned now, seemingly unbothered by the water streaming down his face. He moved like a predator. That was the only word for it. Every step was deliberate, economical, imbued with a kind of power that made the space around him feel smaller. Sofia found herself watching the breadth of his shoulders, the way his soaked shirt clung to the muscles of his back. She looked away quickly, heat rising to her cheeks despite the cold. When they reached the inn, Jasper held the door open for her. A small courtesy, but one that made something flutter in her chest. No one had ever held a door for her before. No one had ever treated her like someone worth such consideration. The inn's common room fell silent when they entered. The innkeeper's wife, a round woman named Marta, who had once chased Sofia out of her establishment with a broom, went pale at the sight of them together. Her eyes darted between Sofia and the stranger, and Sofia watched the calculation happening behind her gaze. Whatever she saw made her drop into a deep curtsy. "My lord," she said, voice trembling, "I didn't expect you back so soon. Is everything to your satisfaction? Can I bring you anything?" "My lord." Sofia looked at the stranger with new eyes. He didn't acknowledge the innkeeper's fawning, simply guided Sofia toward the stairs with a hand at the small of her back. She could feel that touch like a brand, even through the layers of wet fabric and borrowed coat. "We'll need hot water for a bath," he said over his shoulder. "Food, wine, and privacy." "Of course, my lord. Right away, my lord." They climbed the stairs in silence. The inn had 4 rooms on its upper floor, but only one door stood open, revealing a chamber far larger and more richly appointed than anything Sofia had ever seen. A fire crackled in the hearth. Candles burned on every surface. A massive bed dominated one wall, piled high with furs and pillows. She stopped in the doorway, suddenly very aware of what this must look like. A strange man, a private room, her, bedraggled and alone and following him like a lost puppy. "I should go." "Where?" He moved past her into the room, finally setting aside that dark umbrella. Back to the square? Back to your cottage with the hole in the roof and the drafty windows? Her eyes narrowed. How do you know about my cottage? He turned to face her, and in the firelight she could finally see him clearly. He was older than she'd first thought, though still young, maybe 30, with the kind of face that would only improve with age. There were shadows beneath his eyes, lines around his mouth that spoke of burdens carried too long. I know many things about you, Sofia, he said. I know you were left at the temple steps as an infant. I know the village has blamed you for every misfortune since. Failed crops, stillborn calves, the fever that took the blacksmith's son. His jaw tightened. I know they're wrong. About all of it. Sofia's heart was racing now, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Who are you? My name is Jasper. The name hit her like a physical blow. She knew that name. Everyone in the 5 kingdoms knew that name. Jasper Ashworth, the Alpha King, ruler of the Northern Territories and commander of the Wolf Guard. A man so powerful that lesser lords reportedly wet themselves in his presence. A man who was currently standing in front of her in a rain-soaked shirt, looking at her like she was something precious. You're lying, she breathed. I've never lied to you. We've never met. No. Something flickered in those amber eyes. Grief, maybe, or regret. But I've been looking for you for a very long time. A knock at the door interrupted whatever he might have said next. Servants streamed in with a copper tub, bucket after bucket of steaming water, trays of food that made Sofia's empty stomach clench with want. Through it all, Jasper stood by the window, staring out at the rain-washed night with his back to the room. When the servants finally left, he gestured toward the tub without turning. Bathe. Warm yourself. We'll talk when you're ready. I'm not undressing in front of you. Now he did turn, and there was something almost amused in his expression. I'll be outside the door. Take as long as you need. True to his word, he left. Sofia heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard him settle against the wall outside. Only then did she let out the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The bath was heaven. Hot water sinking into frozen muscles, melting away the chill that had settled into her bones. She scrubbed her skin until it was pink, washed her hair with soap that smelled like lavender and honey, and tried very hard not to think about the king waiting outside. The Alpha King. She'd heard stories, of course. Everyone had. They said he was ruthless in battle, that he'd united the fractured northern territories through a combination of military might and strategic brilliance. They said he was fair but unforgiving, that he honored his word and expected the same from others. They said he was looking for a mate. They said his true mate had died years ago, before they ever had the chance to meet. That he'd been searching for her ever since, following the pull of a bond that should have been impossible. Sofia looked down at her own hands, at the way they trembled in the water. It couldn't be. She was nobody. Less than nobody. A cursed orphan with silver eyes and bad luck that clung to her like a second skin. But she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. That humming beneath her skin. That sense of recognition, like meeting someone she'd known in a dream. When she finally emerged from the bath, she found a set of clothes laid out on the bed. Simple, but well made. A soft linen shift, warm wool trousers, thick socks. Someone had thought of everything. She dressed quickly and opened the door. Jasper was exactly where she'd expected him to be, leaning against the opposite wall with his arms crossed over his chest. His hair had dried slightly, curling at his temples. He'd changed into a fresh shirt at some point, though his feet were still bare. He looked almost human like this, almost approachable. Better? He asked. Sofia nodded. Good. He pushed off the wall and gestured toward the room. Then let's talk. The food was still warm. Roast chicken, fresh bread, vegetables glistening with butter. Sophia ate mechanically at first, then with increasing enthusiasm as her body remembered what it meant to be full. Jasper watched her, nursing a glass of wine, saying nothing. Finally, when she couldn't eat another bite, she pushed her plate away and met his eyes. "Why are you here?" "For you." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one that matters." He set down his glass, leaning forward in his chair. The firelight caught his eyes, turning them to molten gold. 3 years ago, I woke in the middle of the night with a pain in my chest like nothing I'd ever felt. Like being torn apart from the inside. I knew in that moment that my true mate existed somewhere in this world, and I knew that she was suffering. Sophia's breath caught. I've been searching ever since, following whispers and rumors and the pull of a bond I can barely feel. It led me here. He reached across the table, his fingers hovering just above hers, not quite touching. "To you." "I'm no one," she whispered. "You're wrong." His voice was fierce now, urgent. "You're the woman I've been dreaming about for 3 years. Silver eyes and dark hair and a spirit that refuses to break no matter how much the world tries to crush it." Tears burned at the back of her throat. "You don't know me. I know enough. I know you tend the gardens of people who spit at you in the street. I know you leave food for the stray cats that no one else cares about. I know you sing to yourself when you think no one's listening, and that your voice is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." His fingers finally made contact with hers, and the world went white. Sophia gasped. It was like touching lightning. Every nerve in her body came alive at once, singing with a recognition so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She could feel him. Not just his skin against hers, but something deeper. His heartbeat, steady and strong. His emotions, a tangle of hope and fear and desperate longing. His love. God's helper. She could feel his love. She pulled her hand back, chest heaving. What was that? The bond. His voice was rough. "I didn't imagine it. You felt it too." "I felt something." "Tell me." He leaned closer. "Tell me what you felt." Sophia pressed a hand to her chest, where her heart was racing like a frightened bird. "I felt you. Your heartbeat. Your emotions." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "How is that possible?" "Because you're my mate." He said it like it was the simplest thing in the world, the most obvious. "Because we were made for each other, Sophia. Two halves of the same soul." She laughed, and it came out broken. "You don't want me. Trust me. I bring nothing but misfortune to everyone around me. Every family that ever took me in suffered for it. Lost crops, sick children, dead livestock. After a while, I stopped letting anyone get close. It was easier to be alone than to watch people blame me for their pain." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she looked away, blinking hard against the tears that threatened to fall. She'd never said any of this out loud before, never admitted how much it had cost her to survive in a world that seemed determined to crush her spirit. "That's what they told you." His jaw tightened with barely suppressed anger. "That's the lie they fed you your whole life so they'd have someone to blame for their own failures. But it's not true. You're not cursed. You're gifted." "Gifted with what?" "The ability to make everyone hate me. The ability to feel." He stood rounding the table to kneel before her chair. This close, she could see the individual flecks of gold in his amber eyes. "The bond isn't one-sided, Sophia. When you hurt, I feel it. When you cry, something in my chest breaks. I felt you tonight, in that square. Your despair, your loneliness. It nearly drove me to my knees. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize." He reached up, brushing a strand of still damp hair from her face. His touch was impossibly gentle for a man of his size. "Never apologize for feeling. I would take every ounce of your pain if I could. I would carry it for you, gladly, for the rest of my life." "Why?" Because I love you. The words hit her like a physical force. She actually flinched, pulling back in her chair. You can't. You don't even know me. I know your soul. He didn't move closer, didn't press. Just stayed kneeling before her like a supplicant, like a worshipper. I've known it for 3 years. In dreams, in glimpses, in the ache that's lived in my chest since the night I first felt you. I love you, Sofia. I have loved you since before we ever met. She was crying now. She couldn't help it. The tears streamed down her face, hot and unstoppable. Everyone hates me, she said, the same words she'd spoken in the rain. My whole life. Everyone I've ever met. They look at me like I'm something wrong, something broken. Then they're blind. Jasper caught a tear on his thumb, wiping it away with infinite tenderness. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, inside and out, and I will spend every day of my life proving it to you if you let me. I don't know how to be loved. Then I'll teach you. He took her hand again, and this time the bond sang between them, warm and golden and so full of hope it made her dizzy. All you have to do is take a chance. Come with me. Leave this place and its cruelty behind. Let me show you what your life could be. And if it doesn't work? Her voice was barely a whisper. If you change your mind? If you wake up one day and realize I'm not worth the trouble? Impossible. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, and she felt the truth of it through the bond, his certainty, his devotion, his absolute, unshakable love. You are worth everything to me, Sofia. You always have been. You always will be. She looked into his eyes, the Alpha King, kneeling at her feet, asking for nothing but the chance to love her. It should have been impossible. It should have been a fairy tale, a dream she'd wake from any moment to find herself alone in her cold cottage, with nothing but the rain for company. But the bond hummed between them, real and undeniable. And for the first time in her life, Sofia felt something that wasn't fear or loneliness or despair. She felt hope. Okay, she breathed. Jasper's eyes widened. Okay, I'll come with you. I'll try. She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. But I can't promise I'll be good at this. At being loved, at being someone worth loving. You don't have to be good at it. He rose, pulling her gently to her feet. You just have to be you. That's all I've ever wanted. And then he kissed her. It was soft at first. Gentle. A question more than a statement. His lips brushed against hers, warm and tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Sofia didn't pull away. She rose up on her toes and pressed closer, her hands finding his shoulders, his chest, the back of his neck. The bond blazed between them, golden light behind her closed eyelids, and she could feel his joy mixing with hers until she couldn't tell where she ended, and he began. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Jasper pressed his forehead against hers, his hands cradling her face like she was something infinitely precious. I love you, he said again. I know it's fast. I know it's strange. But I love you, Sofia. I will love you until the stars fall from the sky and the mountains crumble to dust. She laughed, a wet sound that was half sob. That's very dramatic. I'm the Alpha King. His lips quirked. Drama is expected. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Jasper took her from the village that had hated her for so long, mounted her on his own horse because she'd never learned to ride, and carried her north toward his kingdom. His arms were warm around her, steady and sure, and she found herself leaning back against his chest despite her best efforts to maintain some distance. Relax, he murmured against her ear, his breath warm on her neck. I've got you. She did relax. Against all odds, against every instinct honed by a lifetime of self-reliance, she let herself trust him, let herself be held. They traveled through forests so old the trees blocked out the sun. The air smelled of moss and growing things, and Sophia heard wolves howling in the distance, their voices rising and falling like music. Through mountain passes where the wind howled like wolves, the cold bit at her exposed skin, but Jasper always had another fur to wrap around her, another cup of warm tea pressed into her hands. Through villages where people actually smiled at her, where they bowed to their king and looked at her with curiosity rather than contempt. Children would run alongside the horse, calling out greetings and questions, and Jasper would answer them patiently, his voice warm with affection for his people. "They love you," Sophia observed one evening as they made camp beneath a canopy of stars. "They trust me." He handed her a bowl of stew, then settled beside her on the blanket he'd spread over the cold ground. "Love has to be earned. Trust is given freely at first, and then proven over time." "And have you proven yourself?" He considered the question seriously. "I hope so. I've tried to be the king they deserve, to protect them, to lead them well." His eyes met hers across the flickering firelight. "I'll try to do the same for you, if you'll let me." She learned things about herself she'd never known. The silver of her eyes marked her as a seer, a rare gift that had died out generations ago. Her so-called curse was actually the ability to sense the emotions of others, to feel their pain and their joy as her own. The villagers hadn't hated her because she brought bad luck. They'd hated her because her presence made them confront their own ugliness, their own jealousy and spite. And she learned about Jasper. His kingdom, vast and prosperous. His people, fiercely loyal. His past, marked by loss and loneliness and a love he'd thought he'd never find. He told her about the mate bond, how it worked, how it would grow stronger the more time they spent together. He told her about his parents, killed in a border dispute when he was barely 20. He told her about the years he'd spent searching for her, following rumors and dead ends, never giving up even when everyone around him urged him to find a political match instead. "I knew you were out there," he said one night, as they lay tangled together before a fire in some lord's guest chamber. "I could feel you, like a star on the horizon that I could never quite reach." Sophia traced the scars on his chest, remnants of battles fought and won. "What if you'd never found me? I would have kept looking." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Forever, if necessary. There was never going to be anyone else." She believed him. Through the bond that now burned steady and strong between them, she could feel the truth of his words, the depth of his devotion, the way his heart beat her name with every pulse. She was learning, slowly, what it meant to be loved. The night before they reached the capital, a messenger caught up with them. Urgent news. A faction of rebels had attacked the palace, seeking to overthrow Jasper in his absence. The fighting had been contained, the ringleaders captured, but there were casualties. Friends of Jasper's, people who had died defending his home while he was away. Sophia felt his grief through the bond, a cold weight that settled in her own chest. She held him that night as he wept, pressing kisses to his hair, murmuring nonsense words of comfort. "I should have been there," he whispered. "You were finding me. People died because I wasn't. People would have died anyway." She tilted his face up, made him look at her. "You can't be everywhere. You can't save everyone. But you can honor them by being the king they believed in. The king who came back with his mate by his side." Something shifted in his eyes. "My mate. Yours." It was the first time she'd claimed the title for herself. It felt right. It felt true. "I'm not going anywhere, Jasper. Whatever comes next, we face it together." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and she tasted salt on his lips. The capital was everything Sophia had imagined and nothing she'd expected. a sprawling city built into the side of a mountain, its towers reaching toward the sky like fingers of stone. The palace sat at the peak, a fortress of black granite and silver spires, and when they rode through the gates, the entire household turned out to greet them. There were whispers, of course. The king returning with a strange woman on his horse, her silver eyes marking her as something other. But Jasper silenced them with a single look, his arm tight around her waist as he helped her down from the saddle. "This is Sofia," he announced to the assembled crowd. "My true mate, my future queen. You will treat her with the respect she deserves, or you will answer to me." No one questioned him. No one dared. The weeks turned to months. Sofia learned the rhythms of palace life, the politics and intrigues and endless responsibilities of being the Alpha King's mate. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was also, somehow, everything she'd never known she wanted. She had friends now, ladies of the court who sought her out for tea and conversation, servants who smiled when they saw her, guards who bowed low and called her "my lady" without a hint of mockery. She had purpose, too. Her gift for sensing emotions made her invaluable in negotiations, able to detect lies and hidden agendas that others missed. Jasper relied on her counsel, valued her insight, treated her as a partner in every sense of the word. And she had him, her king, her mate. The man who loved her with such ferocity it sometimes stole her breath. "Are you happy?" he asked one morning, 3 months after they'd arrived at the palace. They were in his private study, her curled up in a chair by the window while he worked through a stack of correspondence. Sofia looked up from her book. "What? Happy?" He set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "I know this isn't the life you imagined. I know it's been a lot to adjust to. But are you happy, Sofia? Here, with me?" She considered the question seriously, thought about the girl she'd been in that village square, soaked through with rain and broken by loneliness. Thought about how far she'd come, how much she'd grown. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm happy." His smile was like watching the sun rise. "Good. Are you? I have you." He crossed the room, knelt before her chair just as he had that first night at the inn. "I have everything I've ever wanted." She cupped his face in her hands, marveling at the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. This man, this king, this impossible, wonderful, stubborn man who had searched for her across kingdoms and years. "I love you," she said. The words came easily now, worn smooth by repetition. "I love you, Jasper. I love you too." He turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm. "My mate, my queen, my everything." Through the bond, she felt the truth of it. His love, vast and deep as the ocean. His devotion, unwavering as the mountains. His joy, bright and warm as summer sun. She had spent her whole life believing she was unlovable, cursed, wrong. But here, in the arms of her king, she finally understood the truth. She had never been broken. She had simply been waiting for someone who could see her clearly, someone who could look past the fear and the lies and the cruelty of small-minded people and find the treasure hidden beneath. She had been waiting for him, and now that she had found him, she was never letting go. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.